Okay, we are live.
Okay, welcome to the Pottstown School District Facilities Finance Committee meeting. Does anyone have any comment?
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Well, then we'll move into Dan Willauer.
Good evening, committee members. We have Bruce here from EI tonight, and he is going to give us an update with his report.
Evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. Maureen, do you want to allow me to share my screen, or?
Yeah, I think you should have it. Or can you, are you not?
Hold on one second. Yep. Okay. Alrighty, can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Alrighty. So we have roughly about 27 slides to go through. We'll get through a lot of them pretty quickly. Some of it will be review. I kind of took out some of the redundant slides from last time, but we can kind of get at it here. So we've been hard at work. We had a couple meetings, small group meetings with Stephen, Maureen, and myself and Ann Long, working through the facilities part of it. And just to recap, our feasibility study is composed of 3 different sections. We've been mainly focused on the facilities part, and we're at a pretty good spot with that in terms of wrapping that up and making any final adjustments. We started getting into the demographics, which focuses a little bit on capacity and enrollment, but we are waiting for the PDE numbers to come out in the beginning of October here. So we'll have more of an update above and beyond what we're going to show on the slide here once we get into October. And then towards the end here, we'll be talking more about the educational program, how to move forward, and kind of tie everything together here. We have some ideas and want to throw them out there just for board consideration of what we feel would be the kind of best way to kind of move forward and make some decisions. So with that, I'll start off with the demographics. Really quickly, this is part of our process that we look at historical and current enrollment. As you can see, going all the way over to the right here, K through 12, enrollment's been, for the most part, pretty steady for the last 20 years. There's been some ups and some downs, with the high point being about 3,200 students enrolled K through 12. We currently sit at 3,136 per last school year. You can see here also 9 through 12 in the last 20 years, it's at its high point through grades 9 through 12. The high point 5 through 8 is a couple years back. It was 1,015. And there were a couple spikes here with K through 4 back in 2018 and all the way back at 2004. But again, everything's been roughly in the ballpark with a few spikes here and there. We typically also like to look at the kindergarten enrollment because that kind of projects where you're going to be kind of moving forward in a lot of cases. And last year's enrollment was at 245. It's a little lower than last year, but higher than a couple of the prior years too. But if you kind of go back through here, you kind of get those ups and downs, which is a kind of pretty consistent pattern. And that's what we really look at as we're kind of studying this and kind of wrapping everything in together. So we'll have more of an update in subsequent presentations, but we just kind of want to give you a snapshot on the historical and current enrollment. We also look at in terms of demographics, the PDE Method 1 projected student enrollment. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, again, we have to wait for the new numbers to come out. But PDE, as you can see over here on the right, our current enrollment is 3,136 per the current school year. We do have this broken down per school, and you can see what PDE's projection was, which was lower than what the actual was. So again, we're kind of waiting for them to come out and adjust their numbers to see what they're looking at. And then we'll also get into the method 2 and analyze that. But for this exercise, we're looking at enrollment versus current district functional capacity. And based on what we're seeing here, we have more than enough capacity, as you guys are aware, based on our enrollment. So what that means is we have flexibility to move things around. There are a couple schools where capacity is right at enrollment, but there is ebbs and flows in that. So again, we'll get into more details as we move forward on that. But we want to kind of show you a snapshot of where we're at with some of the analysis regarding enrollment versus district functional capacity, and then also PD capacity.
If I may jump in here, what jumped out at me is PDE is saying we're going to lose nearly 20% of our enrollment in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Part of the challenge, and Ann and I were kind of talking about this in length, is PDE is based off of their formula, and they are accurate, but they're not accurate. If you look at some of their long-term projections, I mean, you're really falling off. But technically, that's not the case from what we're seeing, especially based on historical data. So we're kind of hesitant to really rely a lot on the PDE projections. We're more focused on the historical data that you've had and those ups and downs, because it has been pretty steady. I don't see, and maybe there'll be an off year where you will drop by 15% or maybe 20%, but we don't see that consistently based on past history of enrollment. Our next step is to kind of get into the educational programming. We did interview principals and we went through that process, but this is the beginnings of how we start analyzing some of the educational needs. We haven't taken it any farther than this. Right now, we're just showing the existing schools, and we have these broken down into 3 different categories. The classrooms, which shows the number of classrooms, the area, and the total area, along with the district capacity and the PDE capacity. The same thing with the support spaces, and the same thing with the ancillary and core areas. Again, they kind of come together between the rows and columns, and we analyze enrollment versus capacity and also functional capacity as we move forward and make adjustments. But we've done this with each elementary school, we've done it with the middle school, and also the high school. And if we move forward with looking at different options and vetting those out, we'll be looking at the existing side by side with the different options with whichever schools we look at. If we look at everything, we'll have options for each. If we look at 1 or 2, you know, just be focused on those 1 or 2 or wherever we move forward, whatever dynamic we move forward with. Our next step is what we do is we take these charts here and make a graphic chart, because some people love these, some people love the more visual, and we put together a kind of this is what we call a kit of parts. It's the same dynamic as the previous charts that you've seen, but it's a graphic representation. And all this is showing right now is the existing spaces for the different elementary schools. As we move forward, and if there's any reconfiguration of any of the spaces, you'd see a darker blue box, which would mean added space. And you'd see a lighter colored blue box that means kind of a renovated space or a repurposed space. So again, we're just showing the existing right now because we have some other things to talk about. But we've done this for each of the schools here moving forward, just in preparation for moving forward. This is an example, as we kind of shown before, of kind of where we go with the different options and some of the graphic detail we get into for better representation of understanding of where we're going with whatever, you know, options we are looking at. And ultimately, we get to this cost sheet here, which we'll talk a little bit more about once we get into the deficiencies. But in this case, the school model, I think it was close to 11 or 12 options. We actually have now whittled them down to 3. But the important thing, the important thing with this is when we get into whether renovation projects or addition projects, or in some cases, new building projects, we look at the different deficiencies and we tie the deficiencies into the construction costs. In this case, for instance, at model number 1, the total construction cost for this option would be $18.6 million. But out of that 18.6, there's $10.1 million worth of deficiencies that are wrapped into that, making it much more efficient and much more cost effective. In addition, which we don't reflect here, there's also deficiencies that go away that are addressed by the construction cost. So we can kind of get into more detail on that as we move forward. But again, we just kind of want to show you where we're going and kind of the level of detail we provide based on where we want to go with this discussion and everything else. So we've mentioned this before. What I did on this slide here is I kind of added the square footage to each of the schools here on the left. You have one of the larger campuses with the school districts, and you have 644,000, a little over that, of square footage of buildings, which is pretty significant. So I wanted to use kind of that as a reference point with some of these subsequent slides. And again, this is more of the detail in our facility part 3 study that shows the deficiency, the cost, and the ranking of those deficiencies. So the next slide here kind of summarizes everything campus-wide of those 644,000 square feet. Let me see if I can, 1 second here. Everybody still see my screen? Is it all good? Okay. So I was playing some. So basically what we look at is the building deficiency totals here. That's the first thing we look at. And we focus on the square footage cost of those deficiencies. Traditionally, what we've seen in all the feasibility studies we do is around $90 a square foot is the threshold. Typically over that means you have some work to do. We've seen districts as high as like $250, $300 per square foot in deficiencies. That's astronomical. Most of them are in, say the 125 to 175 range on the high end. We also see anything below 90 means you're taking pretty good care of your facility, keeping up with stuff. However, on a campus this size, looking at everything together like this can be a little deceiving, and I'll explain why here in a second. Out of this, out of these deficiencies here, we just want to highlight there's 4 schools in particular that really handle the bulk of this. That being Edgewood, the middle school, the high school, and the district administration office. But please keep in mind too, with the middle school and the high school, you have a heck of a lot more square footage there. So that's naturally going to drive up the numbers with any deficiency because you have a lot more real estate to look at. And then out of those deficiencies, when we break it down into categories, the bulk of those deficiencies are HVAC and the interiors of the building. Keep in mind that with older campuses and older buildings, it's not unusual to see higher interior deficiencies above and beyond HVAC. Traditionally, HVAC deficiencies are usually the bulk of the work, but with older buildings, we typically run into higher interior deficiencies than we do HVAC. So what we wanted to do is do a deeper dive into the building deficiencies total as we're looking in here campus-wide. And we want to further break this down by building. So the first one we looked at was Barth Elementary. We're about $54 per square foot. Then Franklin Elementary, we're about $36. Lincoln Elementary, $42. Rupert, $35. Edgewood, $167. Middle School, $62. High School, $78. North End, $119. And the district administration office, $166. So you can see based off of the prior chart, when you look at things holistically, it's a little deceiving when you look at each individual building because there are some things that stand out. And my guess, if I just looked at that summary sheet, I would say, wow, the middle school and the high school, they're really out of whack. But because of the square footage, it's below that $90 a square foot mark that makes it more reasonable. Doesn't mean there's not a lot of things to do by any stretch, but it's a better representation when comparing apples to apples regarding the size of your building and the square footage. So as we were moving forward, our focus really was on the district administration office and also Edgewood. If these have the biggest deficiencies, what's the best course of action with these moving forward? So, let's see here. Yeah, the district administration office here. Sorry, I can't see my whole screen because of the Zoom here. You can see as we move forward here, we're about 166 a square foot. And to further break that down, it's kind of in line with the overall campus evaluation, where the interiors and the HVAC are the bulk of the deficiencies here. And then also rank 1 and 2 is also the focus of where the majority of the deficiencies are that need to be addressed relatively soon, especially rank 1. Just as a recap, rank 1 means hair on fire. We got to kind of address these within 12 months because if they fail, they could have other impacts, which will significantly raise costs, potentially shut down school. And 4 being, hey, if we get to it, we get to it. It's more of a wish list. So the question becomes, what do we do with the district administration office? And some of the questions we should discuss is, one option is, do we keep and renovate? The second option, do we sell the building? The third option, do we demolish and build new? Those are all conversations to have. And, through this process, just with the district administration, we can kind of model out different options to see what's the most cost effective. But by doing that, because there's a educational component to the district administration, we'd have to kind of get into understanding where the district administration offices will go, but also that educational component of the district administration will go too. If it's sold or, if it's demolished or even renovated, because it would have to be phased based on how it's used. So I won't go into detail on this, but I just want to quickly show you, we took the top 3 items per category in terms of cost and just kind of listed them out here. So you just kind of get a sense of, some of the items that were the higher ticket items per each category throughout the district administration office. So again, these are flexible. We've been vetting these out, going back and forth with facilities, with Maureen and Stephen, and we can still make some tweaks, but we're relatively confident we, for the most part, have these where they need to be. I'm sure some other adjustments can be made moving forward, but they're in a good spot here. Then we went over the Edgewood and kind of did the same exercise. Again, looking at the dollars per square foot. And again, it kind of ran in line in parallel with the overall summary of all the buildings, is that interior and HVAC were the top 2 categories. Now, plumbing and electrical aren't any slouches, but they didn't rise to the occasion of the interior and HVAC deficiencies. And again, for Edgewood, you're looking at the rank 1 and 2, a lot of work to be done in both of those. So again, talking about what to do with Edgewood, renovate, put an addition on, maybe a combination of the 2. And again, I'm not advocating for this, but, is there a conversation to demolish and build new? We typically look at all dynamics to make sure what you're doing is cost effective. We've been in a few situations that we renovated and put an addition on, and it got within, say, 25% of demolishing the building and building new. So that's something I think is very important for any district to understand, is if you're going into any major renovation and any renovation addition combination, to understand where that price point is versus new construction, because you just don't want to waste your money.
If I can butt in here again, exterior evaluation, is this the roof? I mean, it needs a new roof.
Yeah, this is the entire building envelope.
So that's including the roof.
Yeah, I have another slide here that shows the major components for each building, the roof and the HVAC. So if you give me 1 second, I can show you that. So we also, again, did the top 3 here. And we can kind of send this out for, if you guys want to look at this a little bit more detail. But this is all in the PDF document that we sent over, all the detail. So we also wanted to look at, the roof deficiencies within each building here. So you can kind of get a sense of, we kind of put the cost and everything. There are some dynamics here that need further evaluation based on different roof. Like for instance, Edgewood, you just mentioned, we have in here, a $5,000 consultant fee to analyze the roof to see if it can be salvaged. If not, it could be segued into a total new roof replacement. The biggest thing we saw initially was the Pottstown High School roof. in terms of significant roof leakage and ponding. But some of the roofs look in pretty good shape, and some of them just need, new flashing or touching up. Some need some spot replacement. But overall, this was the analysis that we conducted with the roof deficiencies. We also took it a step further too, and you understand why I'm kind of focusing on roof and HVAC here in a second. We looked at the deficiencies per school, and also looking at it per cost with the HVAC deficiencies. And you can look at, say, Edgewood, we have about $1.2 million worth of deficiencies with the HVAC. The middle school, 3.9, Pottstown High, 5.7. And the district administration office is just a little bit over $1 million. So, but again, all this detail is in the study. We just kind of broke it out to kind of give you a sense of where we were with those two categories, because those are important with a couple of the ideas we have moving forward. So what are the next steps? We have some districts that focus on, the here and now, kind of more of a Band-Aid approach, reactive. We have some districts that kind of take the Band-Aid approach, but, kind of get a little ahead of themselves. Some that just totally look in the future of how to invest, or how do you kind of do a combination of both? And we look at this from the perspective of what are your biggest expenses? And typically salary and benefits are the districts, or pretty much any business's largest expenses. And then it comes down to energy. And that's the energy you consume, especially with a campus this large. So there's really not much.
Mr. Chris, we're going to butt in just a second.
Sure.
One of our members has a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Deb.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I had a question going back to one of the other slides, and I'll try to remember, but it was something about the capacity, and the numbers were really small. Did some of them say room capacity of 75, or was that 15 and 25? So your PowerPoint presentation, it's not like in slide view, so it's hard to read. I think it was the next one, the one after that.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me put it in slide view. All right, can everybody see it still?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this was the capacity chart that we had here showing.
Well, you had another one and it showed per room.
Oh, this one?
Right.
Yep.
So you see where you have existing,
Mhm.
and all the way on the end where it says what the PDE considers capacity, is that 75 or is that 15 and 25?
At 75.
So 75 per classroom?
Yes. No,
No.
sorry, hold on 1 second. No, that's 25. I'm sorry, that's 25 per classroom, per PDE.
Okay.
So yeah,
All
three
right.
classrooms.
That's a big difference. That's
Yes,
like
yes,
Georgia.
yes,
They
yes,
have
yes.
75 in the class.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Or not.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. And then the other question is about Edgewood, where all those different options. Now, option of tearing it down, rebuilding, is this to, and I think Mr. Hilton, it may have said this is not to bring 5th and 6th grade back, but what would be the purpose of this major renovation? For what's currently there, or for the 5th and 6th grade to come back there?
We haven't gotten to that level yet.
Okay.
So we're just right now we're identifying the deficiencies and looking at different options. I think from our perspective, the focus has to be on the district administration office first.
Right.
So, and then we do have some ideas, because typically you want to address the buildings that have the biggest deficiencies first. And based on the data and the numbers we had, both Edgewood and the DAO had the biggest deficiencies. So those kind of our focus, but we have some ideas of kind of how to build on this, but we do want to focus on the district administration office first.
And that's what you mean by DAO?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Oops. All right, let me move forward here. Okay. So we're back, yep, we're back on this slide. So yeah, the biggest costs traditionally are salaries and benefits and also energy. Energy is something you can control in terms of your usage and whatnot. So we look at this as a big savings opportunities potentially in terms of sustainability and net zero energy. And what I mean by this is ASHRAE, which is the governing code for mechanical systems, they are moving towards implementing in the code buildings being net zero energy probably within a decade. They've been slowly moving towards that in terms of making buildings self-sustaining. So any opportunity you can get and take advantage of grants, and there's a ton out there for sustainability and energy related, especially with this Infrastructure Reduction Act. It's good to look into those. So we think it's a good opportunity to kind of start really doing a deep dive in that to see how we can focus on one building and then build on our savings while addressing the deficiencies. So some of the initial strategies, typically when you're looking at sustainability and energy savings, is really focusing on the building envelope. We'll get in a little bit more detail about that. Then the next step is really kind of high efficiency HVAC systems. An example of that is geothermal. There are other non-geothermal high efficiency HVAC systems, but geothermal is very efficient. When we worked on LEED projects previously, we know once we have a geothermal system, we can max out the energy efficiency category, which is the biggest category in LEED, giving you the most points, kind of getting you up into that gold, platinum range. And then solar. We're seeing kind of a renaissance here with solar, especially with this Infrastructure Reduction Act. And I'll kind of explain and go a little bit more detail into this in subsequent slides here. With this type of strategy, and these aren't the only strategies in terms of kind of a sustainable approach, but there is a potential yearly energy savings anywhere from 10 to 50% plus, depending on your strategies of how you attack this. And at the end of the day, it really will affect your bottom line in a couple of different manners. But approaching it like this, there's also a real great opportunity to implement these strategies into the education curriculum and also engage the community in terms of transparency with the savings and the different strategies and really make this a much bigger feel-good story and benefiting everybody, not just the district. So the one strategy with the envelope, and just doing this alone, you can see up to a 30% savings regarding energy reduction if done properly. Again, this is one of the main strategies if you're looking for passive house or net zero energy, or just looking for a really high performance building. It's really focusing on just insulation, insulation, and insulation. You want to definitely maximize your envelope so you're kind of blowing up that convection loop that happens. What a convection loop is, for those who aren't familiar with it, is when cold air comes in, it heats up, then it rises, and then it goes out the roof, and it creates this kind of circular loop inside and outside of your building. So if you can eliminate that, that's a lot of the, I would say that's about 70% of, gets you about 70% of your efficiency controlling that convection loop. Building orientation also factors into that. If you don't have control over your building orientation, you can focus on controlling the solar heat gain in the winter and also minimizing it in the summer. And then also focusing on high efficiency glazing with the envelope. Those are some of the strategies that you can look at from your building envelope perspective. Same thing with geothermal. You're seeing an energy savings probably up to 30% plus. The system pays itself back in 8 to 10 years. This system is eligible for the investment tax credit. And then also, if you can kind of pair this with a solar strategy, your first cost in annual operation is greatly reduced and basically gives you a quicker payback. More importantly, though, the life expectancy of both the systems of geothermal and solar, respectively, are in the 40 to 50 year range compared to the traditional HVAC systems. And then solar benefits too.
I'm just gonna ask a question real quick. So the geothermal systems though, is that something that you can put in like an existing building?
Yes.
Okay,
What
all right.
you'd have to do is analyze your building and your adjacent land. We've seen in urban areas that you can put it in or under a parking lot. If you have the right conductivity of the soil, then you'd have to do the analysis first just to make sure you had that right conductivity. There's two types of geothermal wells, ones that are horizontal and the other ones that are vertical. So in an urban setting, you'd go more vertical because you're not going to have the
Okay.
real estate to go horizontal.
No, thank you. I wanted to make sure
Yep,
that as we
absolutely.
keep going.
Yep, the solar benefits too can produce 100%. We're actually running into a few districts that are really focusing on this. We have one district in particular that's looking to do a solar field that we're looking to maximize, get about 120 to 125% of their electrical needs. And this can be a revenue generation approach in terms of both the electricity generation, creating revenue from that, but also when you factor in operational savings costs, you can be way ahead of the game looking at this as a dual strategy. There's two different options right now. And again, if this is an option for the district, we can kind of go into more detail and model these out. But there's a direct pay option, which is upfront purchase. And then there's a power purchase agreement, which is zero down and you're leasing the system. There's also an option, say, for instance, that the district can only afford, say, a $5 million solar array. You can combine the two and, upfront purchase what you can afford and then do a power purchase agreement for the remaining if you're looking to maybe cover 100% or even go above and beyond that. So there's options to do that. It just really depends on what strategy you want to attack and how much, solar you're looking for kind of moving forward. What's making this all possible is one's the Infrastructure Act that came out with some of the incentives and rebates, but also the decreased cost of the panels. And with electricity costs increasing, it's making all the numbers work that much better. Next slide. So our next slide here is there's a new bill that just got signed into law January 2024. It opens up in October of this year. If the district was interested in this, it's definitely recommended jumping on this sooner than later because it's only $25 million grant, and there's going to be more than several districts going after this. But there's a 50% match. There's also federal funds that could cover another 30 to 50% of it. And then depending on what happens with the federal funds, the district will be responsible for anywhere from 0 to 20% of the solar costs. Then the district will be responsible for the operation and the maintenance cost of that. And there's some other details on that.
So that's a $25 million ask, right? Per district, is that, or there's only 25 million in the whole pot?
There's only $25 in the whole grant on that.
Oh, okay.
This year.
Okay.
This year, yeah. So while we're focusing on more of the sustainable dynamic here is because you have an older buildings, if you can take a energy dynamic approach, because this is one of the biggest nuggets that any district's going to find, and if you can reduce your consumption from a multiple prong attack, that's going to give you an opportunity to then save money, not raise taxes, and potentially fund educational stuff, from the savings that you're going to see from that. And depending on the strategies you wanted to look at, we can actually model some of these out to see what would be the best interest of the district and how we can wrap the deficiencies into this, because there are some significant HVAC deficiencies within several of the buildings. So if we can tailor, say, a building or two with this strategy, you can be really ahead of the game and potentially free up some funds within a certain period of time based on the savings of that. So This is where we typically are seeing things going. Energy is going to go up. We're seeing more and more renewables. We're seeing more and more grants for energy-related projects, whether it's building envelope, weatherization, really high efficiency systems, and solar panels. So, and on top of that, with the ASHRAE codes going to net zero energy and implementing that into the building code, probably within the next decade, it's probably a good idea to get ahead of it. And in addition to that, wrapping this up into the school curriculum, and using the school as a teaching tool and having the community participating in this. Like, I know one of the requirements for the solar project here is to have the energy savings kind of live on the district's website. I've also seen certain districts have a dashboard in their lobby that can show live what the energy savings is and some of the other saving strategies and sustainable strategies that they're using kind of within the district. These aren't the only sustainable strategies, but this is typically where I like to start because it gives you the biggest bang for your buck if you can attack this, appropriately. But there's definitely other things that we can focus on too. But what we like to do is focus and build off the savings. Because if you can get a lot of savings out of this, it's going to free the district up to be able to do some other dynamics kind of moving forward. However, we have to model those out and see what is the best scenario kind of moving forward. So we're making sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. So with that being said, that kind of wraps up the presentation. I do want to add to the really understanding what to do with the district administration office. We do have some ideas with looking at different options and different models to see what makes sense. But how to move that forward? Is it really worth with that dollar tag on that building to put a lot of money into it? I guess is really what we're kind of questioning. And I think it's worth the exercise kind of going through it and looking at those three different options to see, is it worth keeping? I know there's a lot of history within the school district about closing down the building, selling it, relocating. But we can at least go through the exercise again to see what is in the best interest of the district, both near term and long term.
Ms. Spence,
Thank you. My question is about the solar energy efficient system. Now, the solar system, are you thinking of that for the entire district or just for the admin building? Like you said, that's the primary focus. And when you mentioned having it included in the curriculum, is that something that other districts are doing as like a pathway? We have we have the CTE program. Is that something that could be considered as one of the pathways to learn solar or energy efficient models? And my other question was, I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions because I didn't get a chance to read it. I'll wait and read the entire presentation. And is it okay to email you if I have?
Absolutely. Yeah, the
Okay.
answer to your second question is yes. To use school as a teaching tool is a powerful tool, both with course curriculum and just overall education. It's a great opportunity for that. Going to the first question is, I would recommend, you're not going to address all these efficiencies within 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're looking to do, and our recommendation is to kind of get an overarching strategy that helps you attack some of these deficiencies, but also gets you ahead of the game. So you're not in reactive mode all the time moving forward. But we also have to kind of wrap in the educational component of meeting those needs, because I know there's special education needs that we heard pretty consistently with our interviews with the principals and some other dynamics. So we just don't want to look at the building deficiencies in isolation. And we want to look at this like holistically to see how can we, hate to use this term, but, kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, and give you a lot of bang for your buck as you're going through this. Again, you can attack this of just the deficiencies. I can just look at a solar project, But if you look at this campus wide and have a strategy, say, you know, year 1 and 2, we're going to focus on, say, here's an option. I'll just throw this out there. Hypothetically, we decide to sell the district administration office. And right now I'll just use the option focusing on Edgewood and district administration because they have the highest efficiencies. So we sell the district administration office. We come up with a strategy to move the district administration over to Edgewood and then the educational curriculum over there. But before we do that, we have to renovate Edgewood, and we're probably got to renovate Edgewood pretty significantly, which will give us the opportunity to kind of max out what we need to do from an energy perspective initially, but also max us out on our savings. So we would come up with a game plan of from that standpoint, but we'd also look at it from an overarching district-wide. Can we apply solar to the other buildings? Does it make sense to do that based on available land or roof coverage or whatnot? Because one thing with solar, if you do put it on the roof, you have to look at it from a structural perspective, but you also want to make sure you have a newly installed roof on there, because the last thing you want to do is take the solar panels off, replace the roof within 5 years, and put the panels back on. So we'd really have to come up with a strategic plan of how to handle that if that's the direction you wanted to go, and then kind of wrap the deficiencies in there along with the HVAC too. I think there's a real opportunity with really high HVAC efficiency systems, really combining those two and then tackling the envelope. Again, you're looking at some pretty significant savings if we can map this out properly and take a step-by-step process. I think because of your district and the age of the buildings, it's probably going to be over a 10-year period, but you also want to address your deficiencies that you see here that are high, especially with Edgewood and DAO, and really start getting into the high school and middle school, because probably when you get through those with your strategies, your elementary schools are going to come back online and need some probably significant maintenance once you get past that, you know, say 10-year period, if it takes you that long to get through your current deficiencies that are higher. So, you know, it's going to be a process here that we're going to need to map out and really get a smart strategy and really analyze the savings along with the strategy to see what is the best path forward. And, you know, if it is mapped out, say over a 10-year period, you know, we'd recommend relooking at it every 2 or 3 years, because with newer technology coming out, you know, different approaches, it might need to be adjusted to kind of keep things on track or even give you better savings.
So what decision does the committee have to make or the board have to make today or for the board meeting next week?
No,
Nothing.
there's nothing in the immediate, like, there's nothing going for vote on
Okay.
next Thursday. I think the, you know, what we would like feedback wise is this the route that board members want to go? Highlighting kind of the situation that we're in when it comes to the building repairs and all of the funding that's been, you know, kind of put into play in the last few budget cycles with the state. I mean, years ago, the reimbursement program for building infrastructure and costs was PlanCon, and that's not been a venue that they've funded, and they're moving more towards these different kinds of grants. So when we are looking at the funding and grants and certain components of these grants, whether it be energy or HVAC or whatever it is, we want to make sure that we're targeting the project that makes sense in our long range plan, instead of just picking a component that, you know, we know is probably maybe at the end of the useful life and just repairing it. We want to make sure that, you know, we're addressing the district administration building because we know that's going to be a high cost repair. And Edgewood was a building that we decided to take offline a few years ago, but we've since moved a lot of programs back into that building. So we probably need to, you know, look at really the whole envelope of that building. And do we leave it in the current footprint, or do we make it more efficient for what it's worth? And like Bruce said, try to do a project that's going to be sustainable or give us some energy savings. You know, we want to, that's why we want to look at this with kind of like, you know, all different arm's length ideas, because I think we know we have a lot of buildings that have some repair, some have more than others, but we really just want to make sure we're going to target the right project for our long term.
Okay.
So
got
nothing
it.
for next week's vote. Sorry, kind of.
Okay.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Johnson.
Yes. So I love the thinking about it big picture and looking at what are we gonna do to get the most bang for our buck, and just kind of the holistic thinking there. And I definitely appreciate looking at the different solar and other type of energy grants that might be available. You mentioned that energy is often one of a school district's biggest expenses. I'm kind of wondering in our case if it is or where it ranks. And so I'm wondering if we could get some, this really isn't a question for you, Bruce, more for Maureen, like to get a breakdown of our energy expenses, specifically as it relates to heating and cooling there.
That's
And
one of the
what might
things
be
we're gonna-
changed with solar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're analyzing with Marine. So we're working to get that and our MEP guys, and we'll have an analysis of that here. And that'll be part of the feasibility study too. So you can see live what you're spending. And then that would be factored into the options too. Say if we model the option that the hypothetical one I explained, we look at the, the status quo, which is where you're currently at, and then use that as the basis for future options that we can measure against. Because we look at this data as, if you don't collect the data and analyze it, you can't measure it. So you really don't know how good you're doing.
Right.
So anybody can come in and say, yeah, I can make your building more sustainable and green. It's like, okay, great. But if you can't measure it before and after,
Right. And
it's all
and
a sales
then
pitch.
compare it to what
Yep.
the actual cost of those upgrades will be, which
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's great to go with greener energy just on other merits as well, but I definitely want to see it be cost effective. And I guess the other thought I had, you used the example of like, oh, if we moved the got rid of the admin building and moved it over to Edgewood, and thinking of some of those creative ideas.
Mhm.
I guess part of what I'm thinking going forward is that could be great. I would love to see the breakdown of, a loose plan of like, what would that look like? What would the transition look like? And the costs look like doing that versus renovating both of them. Or I'd be looking for a little bit more by way of like an A and B comparison. There's a lot of info here and it's really good, but I'm a little lost in it in terms of it's hard to compare anything because there's just so much there.
Yeah, and we purposely are not getting into the weeds right now. This is more high altitude. Before we start doing some deep dives, we want to make sure the board's on board with this, that this is the strategy that we want to try to attack here. But to kind of answer your one question, this is kind of the level, we actually get into more detail than this, but we do model, it out similar to this so you can see exactly what we're doing per building. Or if we're just say doing the two buildings between DAO and Edgewood, we'll model out and have a diagram like this for Edgewood saying, okay, we're putting an addition here, we're renovating these spaces, and we're going to do an entire renovation, but hey, we have to do this in phases because we need to maintain the occupancy in there. And it's going to take, say, 36 months because of the multiple phases to be able to handle that. But once it's complete and the DAO is sold, year 3, once we start the project, that's when we'll start seeing the savings. Unless we can say, kind of game plan this out, there's an addition put on first that houses the DAO and maybe part of the curriculum for Edgewood, and then that would free up the rest of the building to be renovated for future use, whatever that use may be. Again, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Doesn't necessarily have to go in that direction, but that's the level of detail we're going to need to get into to accurately project what some of the costs would be, and more importantly, what the best option is for the district. Because you're going to have to spend money here with the deficiencies. It's not the whole $46 million. That looks overwhelming. We don't know one district that, they're going to spend all that money, but it shows you the magnitude of what you're dealing with. And more importantly, it allows you to kind of game plan out and plan ahead of what you need to attack. And I've always liked to approach this, and I've done this with a lot of my projects, is, what's going to give me the most bang for my buck so I can save some money over here to have that pay for the next thing I want to do, so to speak. And the same thing can apply here. And sustainability is really good at that if you focus on the energy piece, especially with the larger the building is, the more savings there's going to be. if you really attack the envelope, the energy, solar, and that.
And all the more you can get funded through grants.
Yeah.
So yes.
And we're seeing a lot more coming out, and that's really what's making this attractive right now, especially solar. They've eliminated the middleman, so the district actually gets more money back in their pocket. Plus, you're allowed, if you generate more than you use, you can throw it back into the grid and benefit from that. We've had a couple of our partners model those scenarios out for other districts, and the numbers work pretty well. I mean, they didn't get into your debt loading where you're currently at and whatnot, but we're seeing some really good examples of this working. And then piggybacking that on, say, with geothermal or something else very high efficient, you're even further ahead of the game, with your facility.
Mr. Amato.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hilton. So I don't know about the other members of the committee, but I've heard so much today in this presentation that honestly, I have a headache trying to keep up to all of it. And I'm assuming that you're not asking anything of the committee today to take to the board in terms of anything right now, are you? Because personally, I would like to have this presentation sent to all the board members and have a deeper look at it and try to start to come up with at least for me what sounds like, okay, what would be the next logical step that we would do? Because the amount of information presented, quite honestly, again, and I'll say for me, maybe because I'm old, but overwhelming.
Yeah.
Overwhelming.
Sorry about that.
No.
Now,
The other way to say that is you were very thorough.
no. Yeah, we're trying to keep this, like, simplify this, because a campus this size, it is overwhelming. You hit the nail on the head. So, but we have to start somewhere, and trying to get that overarching strategy and keep it basic, understanding that we can build upon it, I really think is in the district's best interest, not only for the near term, but for the long term.
Yeah. Again, a lot of things to consider.
Yep.
Lots of things to consider. And when you start talking about doing away with a building, then that certainly adds a lot to be considered.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add, I'm very sensitive to your history and over the years of different dynamics you've gone through in the political environment. So I'm not advocating for anything on either direction. We find it best to make sure we model out every option, so you guys are very well informed and educated, so you guys can make the best decision for the district, and we'll be there to give you our opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
And I agree. And history aside,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we have to make what are the best decisions for the district and for the community as a whole. So history takes a second step to that. But when you start talking about leaving a building, then there's an empty space.
Yeah.
What happens to that empty space from the district perspective and from the community perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll ask if there's any more public comment.
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Well, then we'll move into finance with Mrs. Oakley. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce and Ann.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how you can
Yeah, stop share
exit out
video.
of there, but there you go.
Yep, there
Okay,
you go.
thank
Sorry,
you. Thank you
took me
so
a
much.
second.
So I think Dan just had a few brief facility updates that he was just gonna give an update on, and then I'm happy to move right into finance, and we will probably still wrap up in time, Ms. Johnson.
Okay,
I'll be very quick. We just had at Edgewood, the existing vinyl fence that was in front of the building around a playground. We replaced that with a new heavy gauge aluminum fence that's much more secure. And then district-wide, we are underway with the camera upgrades, which that is being funded through the PCCD school safety grants. So that's going well as well, and that's what I have.
Thank you. Yes, I know building principals are really happy to have cameras that they can have a lot more visibility, and we're all on one digital platform now. Believe it or not, we were on an analog platform with a lot of our cameras. So this will be a really nice upgrade from the safety perspective. So thanks, Dan. Board members, for your consideration on the finance items for next week, we have a few special education contracts, all stills, 5 with News Story and 1 for the PA School of the Deaf. We also have the annual resolution for the per capita and occupation tax, and this just takes the delinquent taxes and turns that balance over to Berkheimer for collections. The last thing that we'll have for your consideration for approval is the acknowledgement of the health and safety plan. There is no change to the current health and safety plan. If you remember, this was a result of some of the federal funding that we got through ESSER for COVID relief, and part of that required us to have a health and safety plan that we review every 6 months. So we will be putting that up again with no changes for your consideration. PSBA, the election, we will take a vote of the members up for election, and there are no members that are running opposed. So we have the recommendations for you to vote on. And next month, we are going to bring back some updates on the athletic field study. Mr. Hilton, that concludes my items. I'll pause for questions.
So we'll do the public comment drill one more time. Anything?
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Well, then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Johnson. We got 3 minutes left.
I did not think that was going to happen. I was sure I was going to be able to give you a tough time about going over, but unfortunately, not this month. And I will just say, I'm just a total side note here before we get started. I know some folks on other boards in other parts of the state, and I frequently hear comments about these super long board meetings or committee meetings that are like 3 hours long for one topic. We do pretty good. So just saying, even if we go over occasionally, we're doing okay. So we'll get started. I assume there's no public comment, but because it's on my agenda. Is
Not
there?
at this time, Ms. Johnson.
Okay. So our first item on our agenda is actually something I'm going to ask Mr. Armato to touch on, if he is free and available. You know, we talk a lot about co-curriculars. We know some of the things we frequently cover. We say that they're important. I wanted to give a little bit of time for Mr. Armato to kind of give his philosophy of co-curriculars and specifically even like touch on why do we call them co-curriculars instead of extracurriculars. Before we get into that, why don't I just share my screen real quick? I asked for a list. You can all see the list of co-curriculars, right? These are the ones that are broken down at the moment for, you know, fall and spring and winter and some of the other clubs and things that we have. And this isn't even everything, but I just wanted to kind of throw out there, like, we offer a really wide variety of things. And this does not include a lot of our partnerships, like a lot of the things we might promote with the YWCA, for example, or other pieces of information we send out. So this is just purely to highlight there are a lot of things going on. And I'm trying to stop sharing my screen, but I'm having a little bit of a tough time here for some reason. There we go. We offer a lot and there's a reason, and we keep pushing to offer more, and keep trying to say yes to other opportunities. And why we keep doing that, that is why I'm going to turn it over to John and let him say whatever it is he wants to say about the value of co-curriculars.
Wow.
John, please do not take the whole hour.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will be brief and hopefully concise. And the use of term is very important to me because that predisposes how people think. For a long time and in many places, all of that list of things that you've just shown and many more are called extracurricular. And I bristle at the term extracurricular because extra to me denotes that that's something that is not necessarily needed and can be easily done away with. We don't have extracurricular. We have co-curricular. Co-curricular to me means that all of those activities, whether they are athletic or non-athletic, support the academic mission of the school. And our school district mission, as stated, is to prepare each student by name for success at every level. So when I look at that, I say to myself, well, what types of things, besides knowing reading, writing, and arithmetic, what types of things are necessary to be prepared for success at every level and, quite obviously, success after school? So do you have to have the ability to communicate? Do you have to have the ability to work with others? Do you have to have resiliency? Do you have to have leadership skills? Do you have to be able to have mental clarity of your own thoughts? Do you have to be able to self-regulate your emotions? All of those things are part of learning how to become successful, and all of those things are strong components of all co-curricular activities. And I will emphasize again, I'm not just talking about athletics. I'm talking about all of our co-curricular activities, whether they're athletic or non-athletic. If you on a Friday night, if you go to the stadium and you see a football game and you watch the players, all those things I just talked about, you'll see. But at halftime, if you watch the band perform, you'll see all of those same things applied. And if you watch the cheerleaders, you'll see all of those same things applied. So I know that many times people want to think, particularly as it relates to athletics, that it's learning how to throw a ball, bounce a ball, do whatever. And that's not the case at all. That I can tell you clearly, my own coaching experience, my own experience as an athletic administrator has been that the successful coaches that I know, they approach their craft with this in mind. If the only thing that the student leaves at the end of the season or the end of the career with is the athletic skills to perform whatever event it is, then they look at themselves as a failure, because their job is to help prepare each student for success at every level. And that's the way they approach it. In terms of what has been documented as the value of co-curricular activities, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about establishing self-esteem, without question, across the board, you'll see that supported. When we talk about the value of individual development as it relates to now directly, as it relates to the academic mission. So what are the three basic things that we look at in the academic mission? Students' grades, their performance in class, their attendance in class and in school, and their discipline. So for a number of years in our district, We haven't done it most recently, however. And for a number of years, every marking period, we would monitor all of our students, the entire student body, on those three areas: discipline, attendance, academic performance. And when we did that and we looked at students who participated in co-curricular activities as a group, that group outperformed in those three categories, outperformed non-participating students as a group. So again, to me, it just further emphasizes the importance and the value. When we talk about hiring, bringing on more school counselors, psychologists, that whole array of people that are there to support students, and believe me, I fully support all the things that we have done in that area. I would suggest that when we look at the co-curricular program, look at the coaches and the sponsors of the programs that we have a lot of those people doing the same things on a daily basis and doing them in a way that in some ways more significant because they have developed a strong working relationship with that group of students that they have. Yeah, I don't care whether you're talking about student government, marching band, the flag corps, the cheerleaders, the football team. Take your pick. Doesn't matter. Those coaches, those sponsors develop a strong relationship with the students that they work with on a daily basis in a much different setting than the classroom setting. So for all of those reasons, and I don't think it's any surprise to anybody because I have been an advocate of co-curricular activities from day one, and I will say it from this reason. First, because I feel like I benefited when I was in school, benefited from those activities, benefited from the relationship, the mentorship that I received from coaches and sponsors in the various sports and organizations that I belong to. And you know, that made me a firm believer, and nothing that has happened in the, whatever it is, 55 years, I think, of being involved in the Pottstown School District and co-curricular activities, nothing has happened to change my mind about that, and in fact has only fortified my belief in it. I think that's it.
Thank you. Kansianik, thoughts?
Yeah, I may have missed it. I don't know if you said this, Mr. Armato, but another thing that I like about co-curriculars in particular, the variety that we have is that the social aspect. There are so many students who would never make friends without the co-curricular atmosphere. It also teaches them how to work together, how to hold each other accountable, how to take responsibility for their actions. And I just feel like there's such a personality building aspect of that with the social component, along with the academics and the other things you listed. So that was just my 2 cents to add.
Sure, I was trying to contain myself a little bit, but all of those things that you just said, they are all 100% right on target.
And just to add to that, I think that like with teams, even if it's an individual type of sport like wrestling, you're still on a team and you still have a collective identity as a team. And I think that there's something about whether it's sports or whether it's the school play or student government, having a collective goal, which is, regardless of the nature of it, is so good for building that connection. Like in class, I think sometimes students can be like, well, it's my grades. It's my, whether they're failing or whether they're doing great, there isn't necessarily a strong sense of like, my team needs me. Like people are relying on me, which touches on the accountability piece that you just mentioned as well. So I just feel like, certainly I know I benefited when I was a kid. I see my kids benefit in the ways that they are all participating in different things now. And I love seeing too, like there's times where kids who maybe struggle with school, like really find a niche in a certain activity. But I've also seen kids who are like really good in school and then struggle with an athletic, which I also think is incredibly valuable. Like it creates that well-rounded atmosphere where there's some things you're gonna struggle with more. There's some things you're gonna have an easier time with. And just both of those are so essential for developing character and developing like a positive sense of self and everything. And so I think it's great. And I know that there's continued to be more emphasis even at the high school on like everybody get involved with something, pick something. Like it doesn't have to be an everyday kind of thing or an every season kind of thing, but like find your spot beyond just showing up to class, which is important, obviously. But yeah, so thank you, Mr. Amato, for touching on that. Because I know we always do make a big deal about co-curriculars, not extracurriculars. And I just am happy to have you like kind of lay out why that distinction matters so much.
Sure. Matter of fact, this afternoon, right after school, I was with a group of students that are looking to meet to form a service club, and again, for all those purposes that we just said, that club hopefully will come to fruition, and it'll be another opportunity for students to participate. And the exact point of it doesn't matter what it is, it's opportunity to be part of something. And again, whether it's athletic, non-athletic, I'm not sure where esports falls, whether that's athletic or non-athletic, but it's all, to me, it's all opportunity.
Still got that team feel. So yeah. Okay, well, I will pivot into the next thing on our list, which is, before I do that, I'm curious for any of the committee members or board members who are on, has anybody else read the book, The Anxious Generation? It's okay. It wasn't homework. I just was curious, because what we're going to talk about a little bit more tonight is the issue of cell phones and social media and some of the more recent trends with, let's just say, like young people and the way that recent developments in technology and social media have changed our lives and their lives. And so this has been like a really hot topic kind of nationally. I don't know if everybody's seen, but like in the news, it's not just been Pottstown where the issue of cell phones and getting them out of schools has come up. And it's certainly not just Pottstown where we've been talking about mental health and the need for counselors and the need to address some of these concerns. This book, which I did recently read, is part of the reason there's been a lot of coalescing around the role that cell phones specifically might play with teen mental health. And so what I wanted to do tonight, we're not going to like solve the problem, obviously. We're not even going to really try. We're going to just spend a little bit of time looking at it, not so that we can stay there, but so that we can understand it and so that we can get some discussion going as a school community, not even going because we're already having it, but continue it and look at how we as a district, and in this case specifically as a board, might be able to better support our students in the realm of digital wellness, for lack of a better term. So I'm going to do is I'm going to show a slideshow and walk through it. Feel free to stop me if you have questions. And we'll just kind of like explore the issue for a little bit and then maybe wrap up with a little bit more discussion. but don't get bogged down with all of my charts, because I do have a bunch of them. Okay. So, and does everybody see that okay? Okay, something about my screen tonight, it's just a little wonky, but as long as you can see it. I say that, but I can't see some of my own screen, which is a problem. Okay, so what is being blocked for me for some reason is the very top, but it's just a timeline of whether it be like smartphones specifically and social media. So Facebook came out mainstream outside of college campuses in 2006. iPhone in 2007, first Android smartphone in 2008, Instagram, which was only available originally on phones in 2010, and then Snapchat in 2011. And obviously there are many, many more things we could look at, but those are some of the really big picture ones, just so we're seeing like when these things first arrived on the scene. Okay. In 2011, only 23% of teens at the time had a smartphone. By 2016, 79% had a smartphone. And you'll remember by 2016, we had Instagram and Snapchat and a lot of the apps that would be relevant to that. So we saw a real explosion, not just in the general population, but in teens specifically, with access to the internet, social media, and everything related to that right in your pocket, available at any time. Because from like 2010 to 2015 is when we saw this explosion of growth. I'm going to leave this chart up for a little bit because I know you're going to want to take a look. I may even allow for like an awkward pause where I don't even say anything, but the shaded part is as we're seeing the rapid adoption of smartphones among teens. So you see at the top, % of US undergraduates diagnosed with a mental illness, with anxiety and depression going up quite rapidly during that time, and then continuing. There is a slight increase in some other mental health issues, but not nearly as much as anxiety and depression. Throughout all the charts, you're going to see that shaded area. It's that time frame of rapid adoption of cell phones and social media. This chart breaks it down by age, just with anxiety specifically, where you're seeing the youngest population at any given plot point along that graph with rapidly increasing anxiety, but less so as you get into older ages. In the book, he kind of broke it into Gen Z versus millennials. Millennials having a lot less of an impact, but he noted younger millennials definitely had some impact, but you didn't see it equally. You saw even the youngest of Gen Z have a worse impact than older Gen Z, if that makes sense. So it's not just been across the board type of situation. And some people might say, well, we're just getting more accepting of talking about mental health. There's less stigma, so people are talking about it. They're going to therapists more. They're getting diagnosed. Maybe this problem existed all along, but was just underdiagnosed. Well, we're also seeing behaviors that demonstrate extreme mental distress go up, with an incredible increase in self-harm and suicide among girls, and a really significant one, less so than girls, but still incredibly significant among boys. So we're seeing not just diagnosis going up, but the actual types of self-harm and suicide that we've documented all along, kind of just helping to show this is not just a matter of we now recognize it and we go to the therapist now and we get a diagnosis. Does that make sense? The behaviors are matching the self-reported types of increase and the therapist and psychologist type reported increase. So this shows the suicide rates. And non-suicidal self-harm. Oh, nope, that one, I can't see it. I'm sorry. I can't actually read it because of the way my screen is showing it. This is a different one. This is kids who are saying that they are satisfied with themselves. And again, that shaded part, being that rapid increase in adoption of cell phones and social media, which I mean, it's really notable. Loneliness. And this one I wanted to throw in there because I am convinced that the increase in sleep deprivation among young people has a whole lot to do with phones in bedrooms. And I remember a time years ago now, I was volunteering in one of my kids' classrooms, young elementary, and a child was very clearly very tired. And I'm like, didn't you get good sleep last night? Like, were you up late? And they were like, I was playing video games till 3 a.m. And that wasn't a cell phone, but it was still the influence of technology. And very often with video games, it's internet connected technology. But regardless, the aspect of sleep hygiene and sleep wellness has an incredible effect on mental health. Even take the phone out of it. Mental health, physical injury, just your likelihood of getting an injury if you have not been getting enough sleep goes up significantly, and just your overall well-being, and certainly academic performance. Just the sleep thing is a highly related issue. Oh, and that is, I thought I had more charts in there. I went a little quicker than I thought. But what can Pottstown School District do to promote digital health and wellness? Thinking of the issue as a wellness issue, not as a behavior issue or something to like a mandate issue, but more thinking of it as a cell phones are here. They're a part of our lives. Different kids are allowed to have them at different ages, and that's maybe part of the conversation, especially within families, about digital wellness. But what do we do as a district that can help promote really what are essentially like healthy habits, and modeling healthy behaviors, and how we even do things in school? Ms. Spence.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I I agree with your presentation. It's something I figured out a while ago when my son was in high school, because they made a hard rule removing the cell phones from the classroom, and the students had a hard time with that rule. My son had a really hard time with it. It was bad, but it was a hard rule. He adjusted, and I don't know if he quite adjusted. He found a way to sneak around with phone, but but I mean, it wasn't out in the open and as visible as it would have been prior to. He was in a trade school, and they would use the phone for video recording their projects and taking notes and measurements and researching on YouTube. But he was very much attached to his phone. I think he still is a part of his body. But I strongly believe that those numbers that increase within that time frame is definitely because of the use of social media, giving it to our young people too early, and they become addicted to it at the age of 8 years old, 9 years old, and you remove that device, it's like as if it's the end of the world. And it's so sad to see that, because we just live, especially in Pottstown, such a beautiful community. To go out, you could run, you could go on a bike trail, you could do so many things, but they're inside on either the video game. I don't know if Fortnite is still a thing, but I remember my son being a teenager, that was a thing. They were all inside playing that video game and on their cell phone. But even knowing that it removing it causes just as much harm as having them keep it. I think removing it and that harm is short-lived. They eventually learn to adapt or they use it less. So I do believe we need to remove it from the school district. Use those containers, put it in there in the morning, they'll get it in the afternoon. I think that would be a really good way to say, hey, we believe in you being able to adjust to life without it. You will figure out ways to do your research on your Chromebook. You will be able to communicate with whoever via email. You can survive without it. If they know that the school says you can't survive without and you have to have it all the time, I don't see that as helping with their mental health. And one thing you forgot in your presentation, YouTube started in 2005. So you had social media 2006, YouTube was 2005. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kancianik.
Yeah, I think one aspect, right, is the parents. Point number one is the kids are modeling their parents and the parents are on the phone all the time. That's number one. Then number two, there's a lot of parent anxiety. Like, I need to know where my kid is. I need to be able to reach them. They need to be able to reach me. And there's also the parents, it makes the parents' job easier. If the child's on their phone or on the technology, they're safe sitting right there and you don't have to watch them, So there's a lot of maybe parent education needs to happen. And I'm guilty of some of that, where's my kid? Well, I'll just look on the phone. Oh, he's wherever, you know what I mean? So it's hard to, as a district, it's hard to police all these different issues. Although they shouldn't be on their phone when they're in class. I mean, that's not debatable, but I don't know how to fix all those other things. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
Yeah.
I hope it made sense.
It did.
It's
And
amazing.
honestly, it makes me think in the book, he talks a lot about, he talks about each of those things you said with parents. Partly the ease and the I'm at the grocery store and my even, young kid is giving me a rough time, give them the phone and they can at least let me shop and not bother everyone. And it's a very understandable thing, but from the time many of these kids are very young, they're, on screens nearly all of the time. In fact, one of the studies referenced in the book was the number of youth, teens, whatever he called them at that part. They're the number of them who said that they are nearly constantly on their phones and social media was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was startling. And it wasn't that they are literally always on there, but it's that idea of they're always attached, they're always looking, and I get it. It's easy. It's with me all the time. I believe it was Miss Spence. She said for her son, it was like another part of his body. I use it as another part of my brain. I use it for notes. I use it for my calendar. I use it for, talking to people. And so it's just become this everybody's external hard drive, among other things, that it's very difficult to know what it looks like. What does healthy look like? And I feel like on one hand, we're looking at it and how it's affected young people and their mental health. But even if many adults haven't been as affected mental health wise, it still has totally rewired how we do things. And so the challenge is my inclination is to think we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. And would we actually want to, when it's a useful tool? It's just also, it's fire or whatever. It's brand new to us and we haven't figured out how to use it in a way that is sustainable for us as people. And so then we're all trying to figure it out ourselves and trying to figure out how to help kids with it. another just thing worth noting from the book, and that connects to what you said, Ms. Kancianik, is that parents, they have a lot of anxiety. They want to be in touch with their kids. And I didn't go deep into this in the presentation, but he kind of gives this hypothesis that we've actually underprotected kids online, but while overprotecting them out in the real world. Like, he uses all the examples of how kids play outside less, and it's actually safer now than it used to be. And he goes through all these stats, but we just have so much anxiety now, and understandably, about safety, physical safety. And we kind of have this idea, if they're on the phone, if they're on the computer, whatever, they're right here, I can see nothing bad's happening to them, right? Like, they're safe, but they're not, like, totally. Ms. Spence.
Yes, thank you. I just had another thing to say. One, they're definitely not always safe online. There's so many predators online. I even cringe when I see some young parents post pictures of their babies, and you can just imagine where that's going to go on the dark web and what they're going to do with that. So and so for those parents doing that for their young children, and then the teenagers also posting, and the bullying that goes on online and on social media. There's several studies that show the teenagers committing suicide because someone bullied them or made them send an inappropriate picture and all of that stuff. And so it's just like, I think with social media, when we give it to our kids without guidance, without any type of protection, without any guardrails, it's like giving them drugs, because you give your child crack, they will die. And to give them an Instagram or TikTok, and if they're not mentally able to handle that, yes, they can possibly, die. And I think as a district, we can be leaders in that. We won't participate in that. And I know that they can't get on social media with the Chromebooks and stuff like that, which is great. So that's a big part of eliminating the bad side of technology. And I do agree with you, Mrs. Johnson. This is a good tool. Technology is a good tool, and it's absolutely amazing what we can do now and how it grows. And I don't want to get rid of it. I just want to keep our kids safe. And there's one more other thing I was just trying to remember. When you get old, it's really hard, man. Don't get old, I tell you. I guess I gotta come back, I guess. I
That's
can't
fine.
remember.
That's all good. Ms. Kancianik.
Yeah, I was gonna say something that actually Ms. Spence touched on. You had mentioned about the how we're under protecting the kids. It's such a false sense of security, right? Like, you think you know where they are, or even if you do know where they are, they could be talking to somebody across the world, and you have no idea. And they could be sending pictures, doing whatever, and you have no idea. And that is so scary, that you are trying to protect them, and at the same time you're really opening them up. Or like how she said, you're sharing pictures online, and then they end up whatever, wherever.
Right.
So I just think but I don't know that all parents know that or understand that, and that's where the parent education piece comes in. Now, whether or not they have the time, means to dive into such education, I don't know. But I think that that's, probably the starting point.
Yeah.
And because at
Right.
one point we didn't know that crack was bad. They were putting it in foods and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
So
no, it is an education piece, because
well, not crack, but cocaine, you know what I meant.
I know what you meant. I was tracking. But no, it is an education piece, and I think that's a lot of what we can do as a district, regardless of any other steps that get taken and how stuff is enforced within the school in terms of where phones are allowed and where they aren't. Part of it is just letting it become a part of what we talk about as a community. we've done wellness and health campaigns in the past. I don't remember, we've had policies as a school. Wow, I'm not going to get into all of the can't have cupcakes for birthdays and all that stuff, but like we've done things to try to both within our own practices, but also externally promote healthy habits. Right? Am I right, John? That we've done stuff like this before. So, I mean, I wasn't paying quite as good of attention 10 years ago as I am now, because I barely had kids in school, but just we are a school district, and educating is kind of our thing. So I feel like regardless of other or more dramatic steps, it's worth us kind of leaning into making sure that our families know about some of the dangers. And I don't want it to just make it all be like a totally negative thing, but it's a serious tool. And just like you don't let, a 5-year-old set off the fireworks, I hope, understanding that this can have serious ramifications. And I know we talk about it with students in school. I know it can sometimes get covered in health class, just from things my own kids have said, in terms of like helping kids understand the dangers of sexting and that sort of thing. Like it's touched on how to be healthy and be careful and have some, privacy guardrails and stuff. But when it comes to almost more of the less extreme things and more a matter of like, when you spend 5 hours a day on Instagram, that is not good for your mind. And here's why. I don't know that we really talk about that too much at this point, and maybe it would be good to start. Miss Spence, did you think of your thing?
Yeah, I did.
And
So, what I wanted to say also, that with those mental health numbers, I mean, I think that's also high, as you mentioned, because of the more awareness. But I also, I don't know, I don't really, understand the industry, because I mean, back in the day, they used to say being gay was a mental illness. And so they have more categories now about being mentally ill, and it changes with time. So, I mean, so much for that. But also what I lastly want to say is that in order to promote wellness, we could do it as a PSA, public service announcements within the social media posting that Mr. Armato does. I mean, you can mix in the middle of that about, using your phone to help with monitoring your sleep. I've done that within this past year. I use my phone and my watch, and I can determine how much sleep did I get. I'm aiming for 6 to 7, and I know when I stay within 6 to 7, and I even dive in deeper with deep sleep and light sleep and REM and all of that stuff. And when I get into those perfect realms, my productivity the next day is like through the roof, and I'm already an overly, hyper engaged person when it comes to work and things of that nature. But when my sleep is within those perfect numbers, it's like 10x. So we can share that with the students as a public service announcement. If your numbers are within this level, and they can all do it, you won't get as deep numbers with it just being on your phone and not on your watch. But if it's on your phone, you can still determine how long you sleep. And we can integrate that in the social media that we do, along with the sports, along with the academic success and the college success, and all of those things that we acknowledge. I think that would be a great thing to add to our social media, about sleep, about, friends don't let other friends, Instagram at 11 o'clock or something like that. And for the parents, do you know where your child's phone is at 10 o'clock? Make it funny,
I love that.
make it fun, because I remember when I was a kid, it used to be, do you know where your kid is at 10 o'clock?
I knew where you were going with that. Yes.
then-
No, that's great.
And then the smoking commercials, like the smoking PSAs, you see the people with the hole in their neck and all that, the heart monitor and all that stuff. I believe those commercials decrease smoking. And then they banned smoking in bars and restaurants, in schools and all that stuff. So I think along with the PSA and policy, I think we'd be able to have healthier students. Even this year, you'll see the change very quickly. So thank you.
Yeah. Two thoughts to that. The sleep score thing's really interesting. I know when I started tracking, I really thought it was interesting when I started tracking my own. I got a smartwatch, and it was like a little bit of accountability. Like, okay, I can see on that, like this is telling me my sleep score is 60 right now, which is terrible. On my my phone, it even like assigns me an animal, like, you know, you're this kind of animal right now. Then it kind of made it fun. But it's really interesting to be able to keep tabs on that and to kind of see it as a way of like, it's a tool. Again, this is we're talking about the same phones and smartwatches that are also a threat can be used to help reflect back to us our whatever, our how we're doing with those things and help us to gauge, you know, some of these areas of health. Phones also have, most of them have apps that will help talk about digital wellness. Like, here's how much time you spent on Facebook today, Laura. Here's how much time you spent doing this. Here's how many times you opened your phone. And it can actually give you that feedback that helps be like, wow, I should probably cool it. And there's even things that will not totally turn your phone off, I don't think, but things that will like, hey, if I tell it, at one point I did this very diligently, I don't want to be on Facebook more than 50 minutes a day. That's the max number of time that can be open in my phone. And when it got to that point, it locked me out of Facebook. Now, as an adult, you can reset your settings. So it's not, but it should. I mean, like, it's partly just to give you the cues so that you can learn greater discipline, not so that someone else, you know, completely locks you out for real. But it gives you that feedback to say, hey, you're on this a lot. And if you already know you're trying to moderate some of that use, it can be really helpful. So I think just being aware of tools like that, promoting tools like that. In the book, it talks about it as a cell phones, social media, and particularly young people, how there's a lot of this, it's a collective action problem. Because everybody has a phone at a certain age and everybody has social media at this certain age, it becomes really difficult as a parent to say, well, not you, you got to wait another 2 years. And that might be a topic, you know, for the future, but I think it's worth noting, like, when communities and groups of people do things together, you have a greater chance of success. Because I can be like, no, not everyone has Instagram, because I have talked to Miss Kancianik and her kids don't have Instagram. And so, like, not, you know, not to specifically go too deep into that one, but like, I know that not all parents are going to get on the same page about all the rules, but I think if the community has a increased awareness of why we'd be wanting to move in a direction that is more tempered with how we do this, and that is more thoughtful and aware of the issues, I think that can help parents collectively to say, hey, this is what's going to work for us, and here's why. And knowing that a lot of people in your community are tracking on the same wavelength as that. Ms. Kinsian, if you don't want to have your hand up anymore.
No, I actually lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm
You-
sorry.
No, it's okay. Oh no, I know what it was.
Okay.
You were saying about tracking your time on your phone and things like that. And I will say, to harken back to what we started this meeting with, when my kids are in curriculars, their phone time drops dramatically
Yes.
because
Yes.
they are doing something else.
Yes.
And they
With real
don't even
people, face to
notice.
face.
With
too.
real people, they don't even worry about it. Like, they don't know that they're not on it. You know what I mean? So just wanted to throw that out there for you,
I
Mr.
was
Armato.
hoping it would come back to that, because I had that thought at the beginning as John was talking. I was like, this actually connects quite a bit. Mr. Armato, you've been surprisingly quiet.
I've been trying to be on the sidelines because, first, remember, I'm not a member of this committee. So
Oh,
I'm trying to
yeah,
be on
no,
the
but
sidelines.
you're de facto in my mind because you're the community relations director. So you get to be on the committee whenever you feel like being on the committee.
So, I mean, I agree with essentially what we've been saying, and trying to mandate things. our track record, and when I say our track record, I don't mean just the school district, but our country's track record in mandating things is not that great. So the real place to attack is education, education, and education. And all the messages have to be persistent and consistent. As people, regardless of their age, go from one place to the next, they keep hearing the same consistent and persistent message. Then there's hope that it will have some effect. Do I believe that banning cell phones from the classroom, that's something that any school district can do, and a number of them have already, and a number of them will in the very near future. That eliminates one aspect of the problem, that the student does not use their device for inappropriate reason in class. All the rest of it, once they take that little phone out of whatever receptacle is going to be there for them to take, then there's the other 24 hours of the day, and what are you doing? And that's where education, both of students and parents, family members, has its value. And I do believe that significant inroads can be made. Whether or not the problem is totally eliminated, it'll be totally eliminated when the next new generation of whatever it is that's going to consume people's thoughts, minds, and actions occurs, and then we'll relive this process all over again. But the device by itself, just like a lot, as you alluded to, and not to go into too much detail about it, but a lot of things have both positive and negative values. And the trick is to learn the difference between the two and act appropriately.
Good deal. Okay, well, I took some notes just, to take back to the administration to bring up at a future meeting, perhaps. But I think this is a really good discussion. So thank you everyone for participating.
If I could,
go ahead. Yeah.
Now that you opened up the can of worms, Ms. Spence, I think, made some excellent points about what can we be doing as a district. And I do think that that's value to take back to central administration. Hey, let's come up with a game plan that we can use district-wide.
Yeah, I particularly love the do you know where your child's phone is? I think that's perfect because we all remember that from when we were the kids. Well, some of us were the kids when that came out. But that goes along with then talking about best practices, or whatever you'd want to call them. But I know in our house, kids do not take their cell phones to bed. We have we have a place where they get plugged in at night and whatever. And I know that's often something that's suggested, but it's one of those things that can make, it's a not terribly dramatic change that can be encouraged as a best practice that can make a ton of difference. Highly effective, but very feasible for people to be we can do that. We can implement that. And we all very, very much can understand why that would be useful. It's not saying no Instagram till you're 16, which is one of the recommendations in this guy's book. And that to me is a little bit more that's pretty drastic, thing to ask. But that would be more of a, not to say not to do it, but that would be more of a bigger, potentially bigger question for some families. Whereas, I don't know, I think a lot of people have already heard about the idea of don't take your phone to bed with you. And so we can almost think through what are the best practices that are kind of common sense, highly agreed on, where to start, what's the low hanging fruit as far as what to encourage. But there's still a lot of clever options there. So So yeah, this is good stuff. I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you all. I do have on the agenda updates from Family Advisory Committee. I don't know if that was going to happen this month or not. I know they just had a really great bingo, right? I was not there, unfortunately. Is there a family advisory person in the waiting room by any chance? Is there?
Yes, there is.
Perfect. If you want to let her in. Hey, Mercedes.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. How are you?
Tired as hell, but I'm here.
Good. Yeah. Feel free
I
to
did
go
not
ahead with
know
the update.
that I did not know we were on the agenda. And I wasn't even aware. I was, I'm just here because I try to always be. But I'll definitely speak on that. So we had a bingo game night. It was the first time that I just thought, I was like, we always have events during the week and it's always a school night and people have to go to work the next day. So I said, how about trying to switch it to a weekend and nobody has to worry about work? Well, some people still have to work, but let's see, try to hit another demographic area of people. And I just went off of faith, expected 100, prayed on it. We got 76. I will tell you that one of the things that I did was I took what I like as a human being, which is personal connection. That makes a big difference. So many people are so busy throwing around their titles and their weight and their power. And it doesn't mean anything to somebody who just wants to have their voice heard and wants some attention and some love. It does, none of that stuff matters. That the day of the event, I made calls to all the families that I interacted with at all the back to school nights that I did this year. And also, it was my daughter and I at the backpack giveaway at the middle school. Dr. Wangia reached out to FAC, and it was my daughter and I who was there. And just calling those people. There was even people that I had a language barrier speaking to, and I called one of my friends who speak Spanish fluently and got that message across. It's things like that that makes a difference. And people had a good time. There was people there who's never played bingo a day in their life. So earlier when Miss Spence said about connecting with families, it does make a difference because when other people, first of all, we can learn from each other, right? And so they don't need to feel alone, or I'm being too strict, or I'm not being strict enough. Everybody's personalities are different. You have passive people, you have passive aggressive people, and you have aggressive people. And I feel like all of us can all learn from each other. So we plan on having an engagement every other month. So out of the 10 months of the school year, 5 of them will we meet, and 5 of them we will be having events. And that I feel is important, not just a one-hit wonder. And then you're like, where did they go, right? No, this needs to be an ongoing thing so people know to prepare. Oh, it's that month time. And so they can prepare properly and be there with their families.
Wonderful. And with the agenda, are you good if I just leave FAC on there as a placeholder so that anytime you want to share an update about an event, it's there?
Sure, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure tonight because I knew you had just had an event and there was the potential for you to share. So thank you for doing that. I'm glad it was such a good turnout too.
You're welcome. And then can I share on something else besides that?
Yeah, go for it.
Bingo game night. I wanted to talk about how when you guys were talking about the cell phones, if you can take this back to the board, is it's one thing if you're going to take cell phones out, right? And whatever they agree upon, I feel like there needs to be something to substitute that downtime. Downtime doing nothing, that's when people get in trouble. So for instance, right now they have that lunch and learn. I think it's an amazing idea at the high school. However, there are children who don't have nothing to do. So this lunch and learn is now feeling like detention, and or they're isolated. So the kids who are doing their homework and ahead of the game and getting all their work done, and they have nothing to do with that time. And it shouldn't feel like a punishment, where there are kids who do need that time. So now when you have kids sitting there and you have people saying, oh, find something to do, right? I feel like there needs to be things in those lunch and learns productive for the kids to do. So have chess, they're using their thinking. It's something quietly. Checkers, so I'm saying something quietly where they have to use their brain, where they're not sitting there bored. And because also what's happening is there's kids who are skipping class of that learn because they don't want to be in there. Their kids are saying how it feels like prison or detention, and that's not right either.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'll make a note.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I guess, or is there anybody else in the waiting room for public comment?
Not at this time, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. Then I think we are done for the night because there is no other business that I'm aware of. So thank you, everyone. And we, oh my word, looking at the clock, we are also, I was not paying attention, but we did good. So thank you all. And I guess we will meet again next month. Looks like October 10th. See you all later.